A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Shaun Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
All right, welcome into One Giant Step. If you hear that giddiness in my voice, I'm Shaun Morash, Bryce Gelman, my partner in crime with us. We are taping this on Thursday, September 5th. Why are we giddy? Football is back. Regular season football is back. Giants football is back. The 2024 season begins this Sunday, the 100th season of Giants football at MetLife Stadium, 1 p.m. Eastern versus the Minnesota Vikings. Kenny Albert, Jonathan Vilma on the call on Fox. Of course, you can listen to all the coverage on WFAN with Bob Papa, Carl Banks, Tino, Schmelk, everybody giddy. I'm ready to go, Bryce. And first of all, hello, before I lay out how this is going to work. How are you? You're sitting here, you're recording here in a Victor Cruz jersey. You ready to go for the season, young man?
Listen, this is the most excited I've been going into a Giants season since last year. That's what I got to say.
That's a fair point, and I want to tackle that in a second. So, we might be getting new listeners or new viewers on YouTube. You can always download and subscribe to the audio version of this podcast free on the Odyssey app and everywhere podcasts are available. We're going to try to give you a pretty consistent podcasting schedule. But just so you know, at Shaun Morash, ShaunMorash, ShaunMorash on X and Twitter is where you can find me. At Bryce Gelman, BryceGelman. If you want to interact with the podcast, interact with us, thoughts, questions, anything, that is where you're going to find us all season long. We are taping this on Thursday, September 5th, okay? We don't have the final injury report. That might at times be dicey with this podcast, but just understand that when you're listening to this, that is the time we are having this conversation at. We are going to do reaction pods and hope that we, have them out there for you first thing the next morning following a game day. That is the plan for Bryce and myself. And because of that, you're going to want to, again, download and subscribe to One Giant Step everywhere podcasts are available. This way, every time the podcast pops up, you got us ready to go. Whether you listen for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or the whole thing, we greatly, greatly appreciate it. Like, subscribe, the whole deal. All right. Preview pods. This is it, baby. This is our first preview pod. We're going to preview every single game as we head into the weekend. We're going to do a little something where we give our game pick, we give a fantasy pick, maybe a player prop, something like that, and the reality of how the Giants have to go about attempting to win a football game. And we call it fantasy versus reality. We close every preview pod with that, dating back to the me and Paul Dottino days. So we will do that as well, continuing. But let's start here, Bryce. Week 1, Minnesota Vikings, Giants. It keeps teetering, but are underdogs at home. And I just want to make a declarative statement about the disrespect the New York Football Giants. And I think it's become senseless disrespect in many ways. I want to make this very clear. So hopefully I am making it clear. I do not think the Giants are entering 2024 as some kind of true Super Bowl contender by any means. So before anybody goes homer, positive, any of that, I get the Giant flaws. And Bryce sees more Giant flaws than me, no doubt about it. But we've gone too far with the disrespect to the Giants heading into this year. And I want everybody to keep something in mind and keep something very sensible and very simple. Is Joe Shaun a great drafter? Well, that's to be determined. He has a few misses. He has a few hits so far. I've liked the free agency tact with this team. Obviously, Bobby Okereke was a smash hit last year. I'm very excited about the Brian Burns trade this year. Look, 2 years ago, Brian Daboll took on a dumpster fire of a Dave Gettleman mess as the head coach of this team that Joe Shaun tried to clean up a little bit with the very little cap space he had to work with. And he took this team to a 9-7-1 record that, frankly, could have been 10 wins, but John Feliciano flexed at the end of a Commander game that took the Giants out of field goal range that would have won the game. Last year, the Giants cycled through 3 quarterbacks in a terrible, terrible roster mismanagement, had no swing tackle on the roster when Andrew Thomas got hurt in week 1. And they played Josh Azudu and Evan Neal at tackle through the first 6 weeks of the year. By the way, neither of those guys were even able to start at any position on this current Giants offensive line this year. They were unplayable tackles that got Daniel Jones hurt, not once, but twice. And yet the Giants, cycling through 3 quarterbacks, managed to win 6 games. Oh, by the way, Lost the Bills game on the final play. Really lost that game at the end of half when Tyrod Taylor had no idea what was going on with clock management. Lost the Ram game when their third kicker of the year, Mason Crosby, missed a field goal as time expired. And lost the Jet game with 13 seconds left because Saquon Barkley couldn't fall down 1 yard. And, oh, by the way, Graham Gano missed multiple kicks in that game as well. We are a Graham Gano injury last year, having him in the Ram game and the Jet game, away from this Giant team going from 9-7-1 to 8-9. I'm laying that all on the table before we get to this Viking game. So the idea that this Giant team, where most sports books have them at 6.5 on the win total, this Giant team that is underdogs versus a team that doesn't have TJ Hawkinson here week 1, that lost Danielle Hunter in the offseason, and Sam Darnold is playing quarterback, I find to be extremely laughable and disrespectful. And why is this? Bryce, I think a couple of things, as I bend down and drop something here, I think a couple of things are true. I think that because of the Giants' open flirtation with looking for a new quarterback, as they should be, we've gone a complete 180 from where we should be with Daniel Jones, where now there's like a national perception that the man can't play the position, which is so far and away not true. He's just not very good at the position, but he's very capable enough to take him to the playoffs 2 years ago. And defensively, I am very shaky about the secondary. It's young, it's unknown, but they did go out for $1.5 million and sign a very sensible deal with Dory Jackson, who, again, gave up on plays late last year, but in 2021, 2022 was one of the best players on said roster.
Yep.
Dude, most of the NFL lives somewhere between 6 and 9 wins, and that's exactly where the Giants have lived the last 2 years. The idea that somehow this roster that I look at, and Bryce, maybe you agree, disagree, as much better than it's been the last 2 years, especially up front when you add Brian Burns, especially in the wide receiver room, Wan'Dale fully healthy, and you add an absolute horse like Malik Neighbors, and especially the biggest weakness over the last 10 years, the offensive line. We're just alone with Jermaine Illuminor and Andrew Thomas at tackles. You throw John Runyon at guard. Nobody's even saying they got to be all world and all great at the line, just capable and adequate. I have a hard time getting behind the disrespect the Giants are facing, that somehow they're one of the 5 worst teams in football this year, and they're underdogs at home to the Sam Darnold Vikings.
Are you surprised, Shaun?
I actually am. I'm surprised by this week.
I'm not.
I'm surprised being underdogs to this Viking team this week.
I'm not. I understood with all the national discourse surrounding Daniel Jones and the hate and the poking fun at him, that this would probably be the case, where people, and that Vegas knows more about each team than all of us combined. Like, they do it for a living. They set lines for a living. So they know.
Can I give you a stat, Bryce? Bryce, can I give you a stat?
Go ahead.
Last year hit the average of what Vegas has done for each of the last 10 years. You know what that stat is? Vegas gets wrong, on average, most cases at least, like last year, 8 teams in the NFL, 4th of the league, they get wrong on that over-under number by 3 games or more. So while they know plenty, that's a large chunk of teams to be that off on.
I'm more or less talking about the game-by-game lines. I'm not talking about the over-unders for the seasons, because anything can happen. Injuries, they can't account for that. They, of course, do in their lines, but they can't. They don't know if your best player is going to go down to a torn ACL in week 1. They don't know. No one knows. But I'm talking about the game-by-game lines. I'm not surprised here. The Giants on paper are a better team than the Vikings. They have returned more of their best players than the Vikings did, losing their de facto, probably their second best player on the team next to Justin Jefferson, Danielle Hunter. So
yeah. I know Hawkinson for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, and how you don't have Hawkinson. Their secondary is ass. Harrison Smith is not getting any younger. So there is a lot of what I look at in this game. We're going to talk about the defense specifically later on in the show, but I look at the Giant offense, and I look at their offensive line, and I don't think that this is being taken into account for how good their offensive line has gotten. Maybe Vegas sees it as the Giants lost the majority of their offense in losing Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles. And you look back at the last 2 years, specifically in 2022, what is the main reason why the Giants made the playoffs? First off, they got off to a really good start. You want to know why they were able to get off to such a good start? Is because they were able to ride Saquon Barkley. They had that de facto superstar in the backfield to consistently give the ball to use in the passing game, who they don't have anymore. So they lost their biggest playmaker. They added another big playmaker in Malik Neighbors, but Where I see this as the biggest sign of disrespect is the fact that the Giants improved so much in the trenches. They did what was needed to be done. It's not sexy. It's not very appealing, but they improved the offensive line. They improved the defensive line and the pass rush, and that is not being taken into account for. So I think we're in lockstep on that. But I wouldn't say it's a major listen, I think it's disrespectful, but again, I don't think it's very surprising. I think that with New York teams, I think in general, the media has these sensationalized takes. They tend to skew one way versus the other because it's the right way to go. It's the best way for takes. It's the best way to piss people off. How many people nationally are riding with the Giants week 1? How many of the big cappers really like the Giants? I haven't looked into it.
I haven't looked into it either.
I really have no idea.
I'm just stunned.
Weekend before.
I'm just stunned though, dude, because you want to talk about the Giant losses. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all,
Yeah.
we've argued about Saquon on this podcast and talked about it and on WFAN all freaking offseason. I look at this, I get the value that he had to the Giants. I don't think the Giants have taken a major step back because Saquon Barkley's on the football team, especially since Malik Neighbors is on the team now.
I don't either, but it's easy. But it's also easy to think that if you're making the lines here because you see the brunt of someone's offensive load being taken away. Yeah. Where else is that being dispersed?
But Bryce,
Daniel Jones for that?
This is my problem though. If we were doing a podcast called One Sinking Ship on the Minnesota Vikings, aren't I talking about how they just lost the best defensive player, Danielle Hunter? Aren't I talking about how Hawkinson's guy? I've mentioned this a million times. And at quarterback, I'm not a big Kirk Cousins guy. Yeah. The guy they drafted, J.J. McCarthy, you've lost that excitement. He's been lost for the year. It's Sam Darnold. And I know that they have Justin Jefferson. I mean, we should see a wide receiver display between those two guys. Sam Darnold has failed time and time again in his career. I feel like if anybody gave a flying you-know-what about the Minnesota Vikings, truly, we'd be talking about, I don't know about this team. The idea that their favorites going to this game, it is Giant disrespect. Now, that's going to take us into what really has to be fundamentally, I think, a Giant worry here, / excited part of this, / I'm anxious about it, and that's the Giants' defensive situation here heading into Sunday, Bryce. Look, let's be honest. If the Giants are going to lose this game and make us all throw up our Cheerios on Sunday or whatever Cheerios is a terrible football snack, but you know what I mean. It's going to be slowing down Justin Jefferson and making sure Sam Darnold doesn't throw to him for 200 yards, something like that. Look, the defensive expectations for this football team, the defensive expectations for this game, Bryce. They added Brian Burns this year, and they traded a good haul to get him and signed him to a mega deal to pair with Kayvon Thibodeau, who in year 3, I like Kayvon Thibodeau more. I feel like he gets too much heat. He made game-changing plays in his first 2 years. Who's getting the double teams, plus Dexter Lawrence up front. I mean, this defensive line has a chance to seriously eat in this game. And I know if Micah McFadden doesn't play, that's going to be a little bit of an issue for the Giants secondarily there as they try to slow down the run. But Bobby Okereke there, obviously losing Xavier McKinney going to hurt the safety position. Long-term, no. Short-term, potentially. Let's see how much Tyler Nubin / Dane Belton, who's banged up this week, play mixing and matching next to Pinnock there. Tay Banks, is he going to follow Jefferson? Probably not. Or Dory Jackson ultimately is going to play a lot for this team, but week 1, maybe 15, 16 snaps. I am worried about the secondary in this game, but the secondary can negate it if this team goes back and Sam Darnold has a propensity to do this. You force him into a worried interception or two. You sack fumble him, something like that. Ultimately, I think I have more confidence that the offense is going to find ways to move the football. I know Brian Flores is going to be aggressive, try to make Daniel Jones panic, try to confuse an offensive line that hasn't gelled together. But defensively, Bryce, this team just cannot get killed on big plays to change the game in this game.
You got to get to the quarterback.
Yeah.
It's so simple. This is going to be the key to every single game because you don't trust the secondary. You got to get to the quarterback. It's as simple as that. You got to have Sam Darnold seeing ghosts.
Yeah.
You got to. Because if you don't, you give him enough time in the pocket, your secondary is going to get cooked by Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's probably the best receiver in the league. I think there are arguments to be made for the other guys. Tyreek Hill. Can't get there yet. We're not there yet, Shaun.
We might be there. We might be there Sunday night when we
Garrett Wilson. There are a lot of names that you could make the argument for, but I think far and away, I wouldn't say far and away, but I think that Justin Jefferson's the best. I think he's clearly the best. So you got someone who is as big of an X factor as that, as a receiver versus your, I mean, I'm not going to say disgustingly bad. I think you went from having by far the worst secondary in the league to having one of the worst secondaries in the league by signing Adoree Jackson, a guy who is, you could say is washed. He's played 36 games over the last 3 years for the Giants, 29 years old. Like, okay, fine. It sounds like he's still in his prime, but we've seen the past couple of years, and he has gotten progressively worse year by year. I think that there was just one thing that I look for on defense, and that is how much are you going to impact the quarterback's play? I mean, I have nothing else to say. Like, what else could there be? Yeah. You've such a big question mark with the secondary. Look, you don't want to test that.
Top 5 pick in Kayvon Thibodeau from 2 years ago. Monster contracts to both Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. If that's where you're investing your resources, it's not good enough just to be like, we were that close. No. Those guys are the heart, soul, foundation of this team, financially and asset-wise. They cannot let Sam Darnold sit back there and pick apart that secondary all day. And it's not to excuse the secondary, and I'm sure there are going to be times I'm frustrated with it. But I'll tell you what, Bryce, I go back to, and you're a little younger than me. I love when I can do this now. It's like the older guy in the pod.
A little.
Before anybody gasps and goes, shut up, just listen to me out. 2007. Obviously, it ended in miraculous fashion for the Giants. And I'm by no means telling you that the 2024 Giants are ending there, but just bear with me with the start of the year. The Giants started that year in a new defensive system with young, unknown guys in the secondary. Corey Webster was a struggling third-year pro, second-year pro. Aaron Ross, a rookie corner, and a bunch of unknowns like James Butler in the safety position, Jibril Wilson. And what happened to the Giants the first 2 games under new defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, like Shane Bowen was there? Man, there were lapses in coverage. There was a lot of young unknown. Let's figure this out chemistry-wise. And the Giants were throttled through the air versus the Dallas Cowboys and Green Bay Packers, and they got off to an 0-2 start before beating Washington in the third games. And the reason they got off to the 0-2 start was not the offense, because Eli Manning and the Giants cooked enough in those first 2 games that could conceivably win. Daniel Jones is not Eli Manning. We're not even sure Jalen Hyatt could ever be close to an Amani Toomer. I'm just telling you, though, that in 2007, the offense was good enough the first 2 games to win games. And I think the Giants offense will be good enough to beat the Vikings, and we'll get to the Commanders next week, the Commanders in the first 2 games. But the difference between that year and this year is if this secondary is having lapses the way that Giants secondary did, young and under a new coordinator, it could devastate this team, because you could afford to lose to the Cowboys and Packers, both playoff teams, both teams they saw later on in the postseason that year. You can't afford that versus the Vikings and Commanders, because ultimately, if you want to make the playoffs, those are games you have to have or should have. Obviously, every season is different. We'll see how good the Vikings and Commanders prove to be. If the Giants were opening up with the Cowboys again, I'd be like, whatever. Okay, I get it. You can't have secondary lapses and lose games like this. The defensive front's got to get after them.
Yeah, Shaun, and going off your point, look at the last 2 years. Look at how important that first game played.
Yep.
For the remainder of the season. Going off of that, it ups the importance of this game so much. In 2022, you beat the Titans the last second, going for 2 at the end of the game. You get it. Yep. You shouldn't have gotten it. They got it. And they go off this unbelievable run. First off, the win put them over 500 for the first time since the 2016 season, which was a win in and of itself, right? And then last year, of course, we know what happens. The Andrew Thomas false start. You back them up. They have to kick the field goal. Gets blocked, and you lose out Andrew Thomas for multiple weeks. You need to set the tone. It's so important going off of these last 2 years. You got to set the tone. You need to win this game. You need to How do you win this game? Getting to the quarterback. So that's the key. That's the key. And it will be the key all year, Shaun.
No doubt about it. Well, Bryce, we're going to rub our hands together, and we're going to get to our fantasy versus reality segment. So again, how this works each and every week, we're going to give you a guy that, and by the way, if you don't play fantasy football weekly or daily, this also works for betting player props, which have become more and more legal by various sportsbooks in New York since that segment started 3-4 seasons ago now, whatever it ended up being. The reality of what it's going to take for the Giants to win the game, plus our game pick. I'm going to start here for week 1, Bryce. Then I'll bend the knee to you, and you'll kind of rip through everything. And for the record, we can double up. Don't panic if this is a live production meeting as we do this. Here's my take. I don't think I'm breaking any ground here. But if you're gambling on this game or fantasy purposes or anything, I believe Malik Neighbors is absolutely a play here. Look, his receiving yard number right now on most sports books is sitting somewhere around 59.5. A receptions over-under number is somewhere around 5.5. Very much positive money on him scoring a touchdown in week 1. I say this to say, matching the Giants being underdogs early in this year, matching Vegas's low expectations, I believe that Vegas is not correctly put into perspective what the Giants are going to at least attempt to do with Malik Neighbors here. They are going to make the offense run through him. And that doesn't mean just drop back, a corner's covering, see if you can chuck the ball 60 yards. There is going to be 2 to 3 bubble screens to Malik Neighbors in this game. They are going to try to put the ball in his hands, hope he can shake a tackle, run somebody over, and make plays. I think that Malik Neighbors is going to go over that yardage prop. I think he's going to have more than 5.5 catches in this game. And it would not stun me the least if Malik Neighbors scores his first touchdown here on opening day. I believe the hype is real about Malik Neighbors. Will that translate in wins over the long term of the 2024 season? We'll see. But I believe that everything we talked about and hyped about from Malik Neighbors starts right here in week 1. And the Vikings secondary, frankly, I don't think is good enough to handle what's coming at him. And there's no NFL tape yet on Malik Neighbors to actually have this. So we saw him in joint practices do just fine versus the Lions in a secondary everybody seems to like.
No. You can't say that about the Lions secondary. They're not.
People love that defense, dude.
They're mid. They love the defense. They don't love the secondary. We got to call a spade there.
When I was at joint practices, those Lions reporters were pumping up those guys. Okay, and Malik Neighbors went out there and torched them. So whatever you want to do, that's the team that's a Super Bowl contender, Bryce. So neither here nor there.
But they do have a mid secondary. That's
okay. They're unknown. Point is
unknown.
Texans blowing past them left and right. It was up to Jones to get him the ball. I think Malik Neighbors is going to eat. So that's my fantasy play here. The reality of the game, we tackled a little bit. The reality is just the secondary can't get torched. Because if every time the Giants go down the field or if they have to settle for 3, you turn around and Justin Jefferson is running free 30 yards behind the defender, it's going to absolutely demoralize this team. So the reality and the path for the Giants game is limit the big plays. Make the Vikings try to grind down the field. And a signature of the Giant defense the last couple of years was bend but don't break. And I know this is a different defensive coordinator. If you give up field goals, you give up field goals. You can't have those big plays go over your head and get into some kind of street match here where it's ping-ponging back and forth. So I'm playing Malik Neighbors on props. The reality is I'm worried about the secondary, clearly giving up big plays, but also, this is where I'm going to give my game pick. I think the Giants are going to force turnovers on Sam Darnold, at least 2 in this game. One might be a sack fumble here, too. I think they will get after him a little bit.
Ow.
Am I slightly worried about the offensive line being confused by Brian Flores' defensive fronts as they try to gel together? Sure. And I think that the offense will have an ugly moment or two. The Giants offense will have an ugly moment or two in this game where, Jones could do 9 things right in this game, but it'll be that one thing you were all screaming about because that's what you're looking for, right? Like that's inevitably going to happen in this game. That being said, I think because of Malik Neighbors, I think that they might even connect a big play to Slayton or Hyde in this game. I think you're going to get a stunning amount of points from the Giants in this game. Remember, this is the Vikings. I don't trust their defense. I'm taking the Giants to win the game. And I'm taking the Giants to win the game 30-19. I think the Vikings will drive down the field and kick a couple field goals and have to keep settling. And that might be the story of the day, that the Vikings and Sam Darnold couldn't keep getting in the end zone. And I think ultimately the Giants are going to find a way to score about 3 touchdowns in this game, kick 3 field goals. Neighbors maybe gets in one of these other receivers, a deep ball, something like that. And Gano connects on a couple. I'm going Giants winning this game 30-19. And we walk away feeling good about the offense, but still, you watch, Monday morning will be bitching and moaning about the one negative play Jones had, or maybe they have 2 touchdown runs and, you only threw 1 touchdown pass. You'll get some of that crap. 30-19, I don't think Sam Darnold's going to be good enough to win this game for the Vikings. Bryce, fantasy reality, a pick to you.
It's Neighbors. My fantasy pick is Neighbors. I don't want to be that guy where I'm just like, I'm teeing it up and we're going to, agree here just to agree. I had Neighbors from the start. I think Neighbors is by far the best pick. He's the most talented guy, fantasy-wise, props-wise, whatever you want to say, on the offensive side. I think when you look at who the Vikings have in their secondary, do any of those names really Is there any real name recognition? They brought in Stephon Gilmore. That's one of those guys. Howard Smith. Both of these guys are significantly older than 30 years old. So you get two really good players, potentially Hall of Fame players, but in the waning years of their career, who else do they have?
Yeah.
Who else do they have realistically? So
I don't like their pass rush either. I know they took what's his face in the first round, the big DJ Turner, but I got to see it from him first too.
Also,
we saw how long it took Kayvon Thibodeau to get cooked.
He's a rookie in his first game, Shaun. This is an opportunity for Malik Neighbors to absolutely eat in his first game of his NFL career. And it's going to be up to Daniel Jones to get him the ball. As you mentioned, they're probably going to run a few bubble screens in this game to not even chance it, to not even allow there to be a chance for Daniel Jones to overthrow him or miss him. Who knows? He might even miss him on the bubble route. But it's the easiest way. It's the easiest way to get him the ball in space and let him do his work and let him eat. He is going to have at least 6 or 7 catches in this game. I don't know what the over-under is, but hammer the over. They are going to force feed him the ball in his first game to get his confidence up for the rest of the year. Take Neighbors in everything. If you're potentially thinking about, if you drafted him in fantasy and you're contemplating starting him, start him. Don't think about it. Start the guy. You'll deal with if he puts up a dud later on in the season. You really think the Giants are going to score 30 points in this game? They only scored 30 points twice last year.
Now, look.
Against the Commanders, against the Cardinals.
Dude, I want to make something very understanding. I know they only did. I got to be consistent here. I believe that this offensive line is going to, and I'm not even shooting for great, be very adequate. They got so much blown up last year by not having tackle play that was it. They invested in Illuminor and running on this line. Andrew Thomas is healthy. I don't even think the line is perfect by any means, but they're going to function as an NFL offense. And 30 points, the fact that we've lowered the bar that much, that feels jarring, is saying something. But think about the way I laid it out for you. Is it that inconceivable versus this Vikings team? Oh, by the way, a better version with Danielle Hunter that Daniel Jones had his best game of his life on not that long ago in a playoff game. Yeah. Is it that inconceivable to say that this offense, where we've been drooling about the O-line and Malik Neighbors, can't find – think about it. All I'm asking them to do is score 3 touchdowns in the game and get within a 50-yard range for Graham Gano on what's looking like a nice Sunday afternoon to kick 3 field goals. 30 points seems like a lot, but when I lay it out that way, is that crazy? I don't think it is, Bryce.
It's not inconceivable whatsoever. I'm just not buying it. I don't see it happening in the first game of the season.
Especially if you get a sack fumble into their territory that you could turn something into. I think it's all there for them.
I just don't see it. I understand, like the pull, to wanting to make that type of prediction based off what we've seen this offseason, based off, the fact that they finally addressed the offensive line, the fact that their defense looks to be as solid as it's been. Besides their secondary, of course. I see it. I see the appeal for the argument that you're making. I just don't buy it. I don't agree with it this early on in the season. I think the Giants win this game, though, Shaun. I really do.
Okay.
This is more I'm thinking with my head and not my heart, because I have been pulled to both sides on this specific argument of whether or not the Giants are going to pull off the victory in week 1. I think the Giants win 20-13. And here's why. I think that their defense is going to allow yards. But I think when it matters the most, on the third and long situations in the red zone, in opposing territory, the Vikings are going to falter. They're going to fall flat on their faces. Sam Darnold is not that guy. He's not. I really believe in the Giants' pass rush. They are going to get to the quarterback when it matters the most. Again, in those third and long situations, the third and short situations in Giants territory. They are going to prevent against multiple touchdowns, allow a field goal or 2. And I think Justin Jefferson will get his. I think he's going to have 100+ yards easily. But I think the Giants make plays. And I think they win this game. And they start the season 1-0, Shaun.
Let's go. So me and Bryce have the Giants 1-0. Don't worry, folks. We're positive in week 1. That doesn't mean that we won't, basically take a dump on this team if they start going south. And Sunday night, Monday morning, whenever you listen to the reaction pod, the reaction hopefully is positive, but it could be much different. But if you can't get excited about playing Sam Darnold the week and the Vikings week 1 as a Giant fan, you're not going to be excited all year. So then maybe Giants football won't be for you in 2024. All right. Again, at Bryce Gelman on Twitter, at Shaun Morash on Twitter. We're going to take your questions, all of that. Sunday night, you want to react, shoot us a, hey, can you touch on this moment from the game on the pod? We'll try to tackle as much of that as possible. And we will recap what is hopefully a Giants 1-0 start. And if it's not, it'll be doom and gloom. But either way, that roller coaster of emotions, we will bottle up and we'll put it out in one Giant step each and every week, twice a week. For Bryce Gelman, I'm Shaun Morash. Thank you for taking one Giant step with us.